Hey, good day, everybody. Steve Prisbrowski here. Welcome to Tip 68 in the series 101 Tips to Ace Your Promotional Exam. As a reminder, my website, code3firetraining.com, has lots of great resources. Check it out. And this series is based on my latest book from Fire Engineering Books and Videos, available off their website as well as mine on the bottom there. 25% off code there in the green box. So, tip 66, tip 67, we talked about fire service leadership books, non-fire service leadership books, a lot of books. Now I want to sort of shift the focus. Let's talk about this tip, which is attending at least one fire service conference every year. Now, we'll get into conferences here in a second, but if nothing else, I want to share this picture. If for no other reason, I love FDIC. I've been going to FDIC since I think 2006, and I wish I would have gone years prior to that, but I didn't know what I didn't know. And we'll also talk about pros and cons of tips, but I still love this picture at FDIC a couple of years ago. I was walking around the exhibit hall. You know, if you've never been to FDIC, you're missing out on the biggest experience out there. I mean, typically 35,000 people over the course of a week. You know, usually it's Monday and Tuesday, hands-on training. There's also pre-conference lecture sessions. So you got hands-on lecture Monday, Tuesday, usually 4 8-hour classes. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are all the classroom sessions. You got the expo hall open on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I mean, it's basically 6 days of just awesomeness, you know, and I know it's you don't know what you don't know. If you've never been there, you got to go, because usually when people go there, their eyes are like this, because it's like, holy shit. You know, just the enormousness of everything, you know, classes, multiple classes and multiple people. You got the expo hall, which is not just the convention center jammed to the gills in the expo hall, but it's also the hallways. Then you go across to the stadium, Lucas Oil Stadium, where the Indianapolis Colts play, and you got the whole floor, or the football field, filled with apparatus and vendors, not to mention the hallways. You know, it's just an awesome experience. I mean, plus they do a lot of other great things that I'll talk about here shortly, but back to this picture. I was walking the expo hall one day, and it was, you know, it's a lot of stuff. It's great exercise. And I remember just seeing this guy walking through there with that vest on. And I'm like, oh, I got to take a picture of that. Because, you know, you got a typical ICS Incident Command System vest that usually says Incident Commander or division supervisor, group supervisor, or public information officer, department asshole. And when I talk about leadership, when I do my Courage Under Fire leadership sessions, one of the things I usually end every session with is this picture here, because to me, it takes courage under fire to be a good, solid leader in today's world, not to mention the fire service. And if you're doing your job as a company officer or a chief officer, there's going to be days that you feel like this guy here. And obviously it's in jest and fun, but if you're doing your job holding people accountable, you're going to feel like this guy. So don't feel alone. But I just look at that picture and that helps keep perspective. Now, if you're feeling like this guy every day or the majority of the time, guess what? You're the problem. If you're never feeling like this guy, you're the problem. So a good leader is going to unfortunately feel like the department asshole at times. Why? Because they're holding people accountable and they're making those tough decisions that nobody else wants to make. So enough said on that, but let's get back to FDIC. I think FDIC is the Super Bowl of all events. And again, if you've been there, you know, great way to reconnect with folks and other things. There's, you know, depending on where you live in the country or in the world, you know, sometimes you may be fortunate enough to have local conferences that are put on by sometimes fire departments. Or I was just in Dubuque, Iowa, where a college actually puts on a conference in partnership, obviously, with the local Dubuque Fire Department. But you may find local conferences that are out there in your area. There may be regional ones, you know, maybe a San Francisco Bay Area where I live, you know, or state conferences. You know, it's not uncommon to have your state firefighters association put on an annual conference, or maybe multiple conferences in different parts of the state, you know, or your state fire chiefs association. And before you say, well, I'm just a firefighter or a company officer, why do I need to deal with or go to a state fire chiefs conference? Well, think about it. Most fire chiefs, if the fire chiefs association just limited themselves to the fire chief, they'd have a limited audience. Most fire chiefs associations open their membership to all chief officers, not to mention all company officers or department members or anybody basically that wants to spend their money and be a member. So my point is that most conferences usually cater to a wide variety of audiences. Like state fire chiefs conferences may have classes not just for fire chiefs, but all the way down, maybe even company officers. Because think about it. Who is your current chief officer? Excuse me. Who's your future chief officers? Company officers and firefighters. So they may also have tracks or pathways or classes that'll help get you engaged so you keep on coming. Just like a lot of state firefighters associations have classes, not just for the firefighters, but for company officers and chief officers, again, to get a bigger audience. So take the time to look, start with your own state. Maybe there's other states. I mean, and maybe you live on, maybe your state doesn't have anything, but there's a lot of places in the country where one part of a state, you may border 2 or 3 states. Look back at like Rhode Island. I was driving from Boston. I flew into Boston a couple months ago, and I drove from Boston to like Hartford, Connecticut. And I think I passed like 4 or 5 states in the course of a 2-hour drive. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of small states back east. So even if your state doesn't have anything, there may be something right next door to you or pretty close to you that's only an hour or 2 away. Now let's talk about why you'd go to conferences. Now, the first reason why, and I'll get to this picture here shortly, but just to set the stage here, why do you go to a conference? I've shared some of those reasons, but you don't know what you don't know. Going to a conference like FDIC, besides the chance to network with others, meet people, hang out with old friends, meet new friends, it's a chance to like I said, network, build relationships. Meet those people that you maybe connect with on social media or interact with on social media, or even have had conversations with on social media, but you've never met in person. Well, you look at the amount of people, I mean, FDIC is the who's who of the fire service conferences. I mean, you look at all the big name authors, speakers, leaders that are out there of all ranks, they're there. And it's a great way to bump into them. And there's many people I've never met before that I had a chance to meet at FDIC. For example, many people that I loved reading their articles or loved hearing them speak, but never had a chance to meet them in person. And the next thing you know, you bump into them at lunchtime or at the bar at night, or just even at the conference. I mean, there's people at FDIC that I never knew before as speakers, but I always sat in the back of their classes or read their stuff. And then, it's like, hey, walked up to them at the end of the session. It's like, hey, you don't know me, but I'm Steve Prusbrowski. Nice to meet you. Sometimes they recognize my name. Sometimes they don't. It's not about me. And it's that start of a great relationship. Like, hey, we're connected on Facebook, or we're connected on Twitter, or blah, blah, blah. And it's a great way to start and build relationships. So obviously there's benefits. Plus there's lots of awesome classes, vendors that are out there. If you're looking for products, you're on an apparatus committee, or you're on a PPE committee, or whatever committee, a lot of great vendors you can interact with. Plus the why of just classes, shitload of classes to attend for all ranks of people. Now you get into the other thing, like I mentioned, usually FDIC is usually every April, every year for a full week. And it's awesome. And again, there's a lot of great benefits. Go to the website, fdic.com, and I'm assuming you can still check out what 2021 and previous years had to offer. Obviously Google, and you can find out what previous years had to offer. I mean, more classes than you can attend, meaning there may be 20 classes at once, 5 of which at one time slot that you want to attend. You can't attend them all, but hey, that's a good problem to have. Pros and cons. Well, cons, very expensive to attend conferences. I totally get it. Some departments have generous tuition reimbursement programs. Like my department, we have a very generous tuition reimbursement program where we support people. I mean, there's a cap on the limit, but not every department supports people with tuition reimbursement, but I know it's expensive, but it's your career, and you may have to save up for it. You may have to sacrifice for it. You may have to give up things to save up money. Now, one of the benefits of being a speaker at a conference like FDIC is that, hey, you don't get paid, but they'll cover your travel. They'll cover your hotel. Perfect. They don't cover my meals, but I got to eat no matter where I'm at. So being a speaker at FDIC, and before you say, well, Steve, I'll never be a speaker at FDIC, I'm just a nobody from wherever, Timbuktu. I used to think that way too. I used to think I needed 20, 25, 30 years in the fire service just to be able to submit a speaking proposal, or I had to work for FDNY or Boston, BFD, CFD, LAFD, SFFD, pick the big name, big city acronym. I thought I used to have that credibility just to be considered to speak. Take a look at those names of speakers every year at FDIC. Obviously, some of them are from big name departments, some of them from departments you've never even heard of. Some of them have been speaking there for years. Some are first timers. Everyone's got to get their chance at some time. So again, you maybe can't afford to go to a conference, or maybe your department doesn't sponsor you. Put in a course submission to speak. Obviously, that's a whole process to do it. But usually every year, right after FDIC or right at FDIC time, they open up the call for papers, and they usually keep it open April, May, and June. There's even a class at FDIC every year. Who wants to be a speaker? Who wants to be an author? So lots of ways to get your foot in the door. Obviously, it helps if you've written some articles for fire engineering or elsewhere to at least have a track record, especially speaking. It helps that you have a track record, because they don't want to pick you to speak when you've never had any public speaking experience. But yeah, there's some cons. It's expensive. It's very overwhelming. I mean, that could be a con to some people of, if you're a true introvert, it can be overwhelming. But I think there's more pros than there are cons. Obviously, I've mentioned a lot of the pros of going to a conference. Now, before I switch to the next slide, as we wind this down, what are the cons about FDIC? This was posted on Dave Statter. Dave Statter runs a website, statter911.com. Dave Statter posts a lot of good things and not so good things. This is one of those not so good things that he posted there: videos, pictures, stories. His website's a great thing to subscribe to. It's free of charge. You get a daily email with highlights from the last 24 hours. I saw this one pop out after a couple of years ago. What happens at FDIC doesn't stay at FDIC. Here's a story of a New Mexico chief and 2 of his deputies suspended because, I guess at lunchtime, they went to a strip club at FDIC.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Sorry, Siri, me too. So now most of you should be going, first of all, they went to FDIC and they went to a strip club. Now, I'm not saying going to strip club's a bad thing. Well, they're in uniform. No one would have known why they're there had they not had apparently they were there in uniform, maybe their badges too. I mean, at lunchtime or dinner, take your badge off that says, FDIC 2021, Steve Prusbrowski. Yeah. Take the badge off when you go off site. Nothing wrong with doing stuff like this, but don't wear your department t-shirt. Don't wear your department uniform, because now you're representing the fire service in your department. You want a good way to get suspended, disciplined? Yeah, do stupid shit like this. But I mean, anyone that's been at FDIC knows there's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on, especially after hours. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you can control yourself and you don't get out of control and you don't do stupid stuff. But don't be the highlight of a news story. There's some, unfortunately, thankfully, this stuff doesn't happen too much that makes the news. But when it does, you don't want to be that person. If you've paid attention to my tips, I'm very fortunate to have Paul Combs. Paul Combs, the dude that every month in FDIC, he's got one of his pieces of artwork here. He also has a lot of great stuff check him out on social media, follow him. He is just so spot on. He was nice enough to let me use a lot of his artwork for my book to help tie my points in. And here's one of his pieces of art on FDIC. This is about FDIC. I mean, you look at what he put here together, fill your head with knowledge and new techniques, discuss issues, suggest solutions, fill your lungs with pride and brotherhood. I mean, full week of training and opportunities, lots of hands-on stuff, lots of products at the expo hall, listen to fire service leaders, be inspired, recharge your passion, recharge your batteries. There's a Courage and Valor 5K run, the NFFF Fallen Firefighter Stair Climb. I mean, this sums up FDIC to a T, and again, this is only a fraction. For all of you that have been to FDIC, you realize there's so much more. But again, this is FDIC in one page, one picture. Paul hit it spot on. Thank you, brother, for allowing me to use the artwork. So ultimately, here as we wind down, while attending a conference is not cheap, it is an investment in yourself and your future. It's also an awesome way to recharge your batteries, learn something new, sharpen your skills, sharpen your saw, whatever phrase you want to use, network, and ultimately build and maintain relationships with other like-minded individuals. You don't know what you don't know. Get out there, find a way to get out there. So ultimately, as always, everybody, thank you very much for the gift of your time. Hopefully you're getting some inspiration, some nuggets out of what I'm sharing and discussing. So until the next time, feel free to reach out, connect with me on social media. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you soon.